My stepbrother whispered. We need to deal with her before she starts asking questions. While we were still standing over my stepfather's grave, I heard him. Every word. I didn't move, didn't flinch, just kept staring at the casket being lowered into the ground, pretending I hadn't just heard the man who grew up next to me plot to erase me from everything my stepfather built. That moment changed everything. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 29 years old, a woodcraft teacher at a small community college. I've never been the loud one, never been the fighter. That was always Jordan, my mom's first son, my stepbrother, the heir, the golden boy of Carter Timberworks. And Charles Carter. He was my stepfather. But honestly, he was more of a real dad to me than my biological father ever was. He married my mom when I was 10, treated me like I was his own, taught me how to carve wood before I could even multiply. He called me the calm in the sawdust. And even though I didn't take over the business, we were close. Really close. The funeral was cold, both literally and emotionally. Jordan stood front and center, all polished in his custom-tailored black suit, shaking hands, making speeches about legacy and vision. My mother stood beside him, quiet, unreadable. I felt like an outsider, even though the man in the casket raised me. And then, just as the last of the mourners were trickling away, my mom pressed a small leather-bound notebook into my hands. Her eyes were red, but she didn't cry. Your father wanted you to have this, she whispered. He said, you'd know what to do with it. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table, staring at the cover. It was Charles's old project notebook, the one he used back in the early days of the mill. Inside were pages of sketches, calculations, and something else. Symbols, codes, half sentences like, inventory record doesn't match, March 5th. Ask Frank about safety complaint. And one line that made my stomach drop. If you're reading this, it means I couldn't stop him. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I drove to Carter Timberworks, the factory that built our family's fortune. I hadn't set foot there in years, but I knew the place like the back of my hand. The creaky side door near the varnish room still stuck the same way it used to when I was 16, sneaking in after hours to help Charles with his orders. I went straight to the old office at the back of the property, the one nobody used anymore. And behind a row of untouched equipment manuals, I found it. Just like his note said, a hidden compartment. Inside was a hard drive, wrapped in plastic, with a note taped to it. Emily, only you. Password is your birthday. Find the truth before Jordan buries it. My hands shook as I held it. That's when I knew. Charles hadn't just died. Something was wrong. Something bigger than I could imagine. Later that afternoon, Jordan called a family meeting. I walked in and found him sitting in Charles's old office chair, feet propped on the desk like he already owned the place. He didn't even look up. Emily, he said, flipping through some papers. We're finalizing the transition. I'll be taking over Carter Timberworks officially. But don't worry, we'll take care of you. I stared at him. Take care of me? Yeah, he smirked. You're not really involved. But we'll buy out your stake. Couple $100,000 maybe. Enough to keep you comfortable. That's when something in me snapped. I pulled the hard drive from my bag and set it on the desk in front of him. What's this? He asked, his face stiffening. Evidence, I said, of what you've been hiding. From Charles. From everyone. He stood up, fast. His jaw clenched. Where did you get that? From the man you called your father, I said. And he didn't trust you with it. The look in his eyes changed, from smug to dangerous. You're making a big mistake, he hissed. Don't push me, Emily. I stared back, my heart pounding. You already did enough damage. Now it's my turn. What I didn't tell him was that I hadn't come alone. I had already shared a copy of the files with someone else. Someone who used to work at the mill and had been fired by Jordan 2 years ago. Someone who just texted me one line 5 minutes ago. We need to talk. I know how Charles really died. I stared at the message on my phone, heart racing. We need to talk. I know how Charles really died. It was from Luis Ortega, a longtime employee at Carter Timber Works. He'd worked with my stepfather for nearly 20 years, until Jordan abruptly fired him 2 years ago for violating safety protocols. I never bought that excuse, and now I was starting to understand why. I texted him back immediately. 10 minutes later, I was sitting in a booth at a dingy diner off Highway 9, the kind of place that smelled like old coffee and fried onions. Luis slid in across from me, a baseball cap pulled low over his brow. He looked older than I remembered, grayer, thinner, but his eyes were sharp. "I heard what happened to Charles," he said quietly. "I didn't come to the funeral. I figured I'd just be in the way." "You wouldn't have been," I said. "You were more family than half the people there." Luis gave a bitter smile and slid a folded piece of paper across the table. "You're not crazy, Emily. Something happened, and I think it was planned." I unfolded the paper. It was a toxicology report. Not official, just a scanned copy. But my heart stopped when I read the final line. Traces of polyethylene glycol and diacetyl detected in high concentrations. "You recognize that?" Luis asked. I nodded slowly. "They're additives. For vape cartridges." He looked me dead in the eye. "Charles didn't smoke, not until 6 months ago. He said Jordan got him hooked on the stuff. It helps with stress," he said. "But I watched that man cough his lungs out every morning. Told him to stop. He didn't listen." My stomach twisted. Jordan knew Charles had a heart condition. He knew what that level of exposure could do. This wasn't just business rivalry. It was premeditated. Luis leaned in. "There's more. I saw Charles arguing with Jordan the day before he died. Not just yelling, screaming, about imported wood, forged safety certificates, stuff that would shut the business down if it ever got out. And the next day, he was gone. I couldn't breathe. "He left me something," I whispered, pulling the hard drive from my bag. "I haven't opened it yet. I was scared." Luis nodded. "Open it, tonight, and be ready for what you'll find." I drove home in silence, hands gripping the wheel so tightly they hurt. My mind kept replaying Charles' final week. How tired he looked. How Jordan suddenly started showing up at the house more often. The way my mom kept avoiding eye contact. When I got home, I locked the door, pulled the shades, and plugged in the drive. A folder popped up, labeled, "If anything happens to me." Inside were scanned invoices, photos of illegal shipments, emails from Jordan to overseas suppliers, even internal safety reports that had been digitally signed by people who no longer worked for the company. I clicked on one video file. It was a security feed from inside the wood treatment facility. Date stamped 10 days before Charles died. Jordan was there, yelling at a foreman. "I don't care if the wood is wet. Stamp it. Push it through. We're not delaying this order." The foreman hesitated. "But the school!" Jordan shoved him. "I said stamp it!" My mouth went dry. The order was for a new charter school downtown, the same one that had mysteriously shut down a wing last week due to toxic air levels. Charles had tried to stop this, and now he was dead. My phone buzzed again. This time it was from Jordan. "We need to talk. Come to the mill tomorrow, just us. No lawyers, no games." My hands shook as I read the message. He knew I had the drive, or at least suspected. I didn't reply. Instead, I printed copies of the most damning files and drove them to a local environmental protection journalist, someone who'd been covering construction corruption for years. I dropped the manila envelope into his mailbox at midnight. No name, no note, just the truth. When I got home, the lights in my apartment were off, but my front door was unlocked. I froze. I always lock it. My heart pounded as I stepped inside, flipping the hallway light on with trembling fingers. Everything looked normal, until I got to my bedroom. My laptop was open. The hard drive? Gone. I turned around to find a message scrawled in black Sharpie on my bathroom mirror. "You should have taken the money." I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch, gripping a baseball bat like it could protect me from what I already knew. Jordan had been inside my apartment. He stole the hard drive, walked through my things, and left a threat in Sharpie across my mirror. He wanted me scared, frozen, silent. But all he did was prove he was guilty. The next morning, I packed a duffel bag, grabbed my laptop and the printed documents I'd already hidden in the lining of an old photo album, and left town. I didn't even tell my mom. I didn't know who she was protecting anymore. I booked a cheap motel an hour away, one of those places where the ice machine never works, and the curtains smell like cigarette smoke. It was perfect. That night, I got a call. It was Noah, the environmental journalist I'd sent the envelope to. His voice was tense. "Emily, I don't know what you gave me, but this is serious. The reports, the emails, they show Carter Timberworks violated half a dozen EPA regulations. If this goes public, the company's finished." "That's the goal," I said. "No, listen. That school project, they already found elevated toxin levels. If this links back to your brother, we're not just talking about fraud. We're talking criminal negligence, maybe worse." My throat tightened. "Worse like jail?" "Worse like manslaughter. One of the kids has respiratory damage. Permanent." My skin went cold. Charles had tried to stop all of this, but Jordan kept pushing, cutting corners, playing God with people's lives. And now, a child might suffer forever because of him. I thanked Noah and hung up. The walls felt like they were closing in. I needed help, real help. So I called the one person I never thought I'd turn to, Luis Ortega. He answered on the first ring. "I saw the footage," I said. "Jordan yelling at the foreman, forcing them to process wood that wasn't ready." "I told you," he said quietly. "That wasn't the first time." "Do you have more?" He paused. "Meet me at the old sawmill tonight. Midnight. Bring everything." "I already gave the files to a reporter." "This isn't for the press," Luis interrupted. "This is bigger than that. You need to see it with your own eyes." The line went dead. I knew it was reckless, stupid even, but something in his voice told me I didn't have a choice. At 11:57 p.m., I parked my car behind the abandoned sawmill. The place had been shut down for years, Charles's decision, after discovering faulty machinery and safety violations. Of course, Jordan wanted to keep it open. I crept through the side entrance, flashlight in hand. The smell of mildew and old sap filled the air. "Luis?" I called. No answer. I kept walking. That's when I saw it. A faint glow coming from the office at the far end of the mill. I pushed the door open and froze. Jordan was standing there, alone, smiling. "Took you long enough," he said. My stomach dropped. "Where's Luis?" Jordan shrugged. "Funny thing, he changed his mind about helping you. Guilt, I guess." "Where is he?" I snapped. Jordan took a step forward. "Gone. Just like that hard drive. Just like Charles." I clenched my fists. "You're not going to get away with this." He tilted his head. "But I already have, haven't I? You think a few papers and a sob story will destroy me? Emily, I am Carter Timberworks. You're just the girl Dad pitied." He reached into his coat pocket and tossed something at my feet. It was Luis's ID badge, smeared with blood. My breath caught in my throat. "I warned you," he said coldly. "Take the money. Walk away. Last chance." I stepped back, hand shaking, and hit the emergency call button on my phone, already connected to the local police station. It buzzed silently in my pocket. Jordan smirked. "You don't have proof anymore." I met his gaze and whispered, "Yes, I do." Because earlier that day, I'd found a second hidden folder on Charles's drive, a backup copy of everything, encrypted and stored in the cloud. I'd already shared it with the EPA, a federal prosecutor, and the parents of the children exposed at the school. And that wasn't all. A voice echoed from the shadows. "Actually, Jordan, we were recording this entire conversation." Luis stepped out, holding a camcorder. Alive, smiling. "Comment the number 3 if you want to see how Jordan reacts when the trap closes around him." I never thought revenge would look like this. Not like some big dramatic showdown, but slow, controlled. Like setting fire to a forest, one dry leaf at a time. You don't just burn it all at once. You start with the pieces no one's watching. The night Jordan tried to corner me at the old mill, everything changed. Seeing Luis walk out of the shadows with that camera in hand, it was the first time I realized he could actually go down for this. For real. And I wasn't going to waste that chance. The very next morning, Luis and I met with EPA investigators. The footage we'd captured, combined with the hard drive backups and the environmental reports from the school, painted a full picture of what Jordan had done. Toxic chemicals in the treatment process, bribed inspectors, rushed projects, falsified signatures, and now medical records from 3 kids with long-term lung damage. The agents didn't even blink. "We'll coordinate with the state attorney general," one of them said. "You've done enough, Miss Carter. We'll take it from here." But they didn't know my brother. I did. Jordan wasn't just arrogant, he was dangerous. And if he even sniffed that something was coming, he'd burn the entire company to the ground just to keep his hands clean. So I asked them to wait. Just 48 hours. That's all I needed. Because it was time for the world to know the truth. I called in every media contact Luis and I could find. Small-town newspapers, environmental bloggers, a local news station that had once done a piece on Carter Timberworks as a model for ethical manufacturing. I fed them everything, the files, the footage, the medical reports. But most importantly, I gave them the full story. Not just what Jordan did, but what Charles tried to stop. I still remember the moment it went live. I was sitting in my apartment, watching the news anchor's face shift from detached professionalism to barely concealed disbelief as she read the headline, "Carter Timberworks under investigation for environmental crimes. CEO implicated in cover-up." And right below it, my photo. My name. I was the whistleblower. The story exploded. By noon, the company's website had crashed. By 2 p.m., investors were pulling out. Clients were canceling contracts. Protesters were gathering outside the factory gates. The school that had used Carter materials announced they were suing. And Jordan? He finally called me. His voice was tight, shaking. Not angry this time, panicked. "What the hell did you do, Emily?" I didn't answer. I just listened. "I swear to God, I will ruin you. You think this is over? You think anyone will believe a stepdaughter with a grudge and some edited footage?" I smiled. "They already do," I said. "But you're right, it's not over." Because the next morning, Jordan was summoned to a board emergency meeting. A few of the older executives, ones who had quietly distanced themselves from him, had joined forces. They invited me to attend. The meeting started with stiff pleasantries. Jordan tried to control the room, but the walls were closing in. One of the board members slid a file across the table. "Is this your signature, Mr. Carter?" Jordan paled. I don't recall." "We do," another man interrupted, "because the signature on this contract matches the one on falsified inspection reports, and we have expert verification to prove it." I sat quietly, letting it all unfold, until one of the board members turned to me. "Miss Carter, would you be willing to step in as interim CEO while we conduct this investigation?" Jordan's chair scraped back violently. "She's not even blood. She's not even a Carter." And that's when I said it, loud, clear. "Neither are you." The room went silent. Jordan froze. The board looked confused, so I continued. "I found Charles's will, the real one. Not the fake document Jordan filed after his death. It was hidden in his old toolbox, witnessed, notarized. And in it, he clearly stated that I was to inherit his stake in Carter Timberworks. Because Jordan," I looked at him directly, "was never legally adopted. Charles raised you, but he never gave you his name. Not on paper, not in court. You've built your life on a lie." Jordan's face went white. His mouth opened, then closed. He had nothing. Jordan didn't say a word. Not when the board confirmed the will. Not when the company's lawyer admitted the original document had been deliberately removed from the legal archives. Not when they told him he would be immediately suspended and referred to the state attorney general for investigation. He just sat there, silent, small. For the first time in my life, I saw him for what he really was. Not the confident executive, not the powerful heir, just a bitter man who thought the world owed him something. And now, it was all crumbling around him. Later that day, I got a call from the lead investigator at the state prosecutor's office. The environmental charges were being escalated to the federal level. They had confirmed that Jordan personally approved the use of banned chemicals and covered up internal reports that warned of serious health risks. Worse, one of the children exposed at the new school was now in the hospital with severe lung damage. The parents were filing criminal charges. And the final blow? The footage Luis recorded at the sawmill, plus the vape chemical report tied to Charles' sudden decline in health, was now under review for possible charges related to wrongful death. It was all happening. Justice wasn't just coming. It was here. The trial started 6 months later. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, protesters, former employees. I sat beside my mother, holding her hand, while Jordan sat at the defense table, eyes hollow, suit wrinkled, surrounded by lawyers who couldn't spin his crimes into misunderstandings. Luis testified first. Then came the EPA officers, then the medical experts, and then I took the stand. I told them everything. How Charles warned me, how Jordan threatened me, how he broke into my home, tried to erase the evidence, and left a message on my mirror like I wouldn't fight back. When I finished, Jordan wouldn't even look at me. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty. On all counts: fraud, environmental negligence, tampering with evidence, and involuntary manslaughter for what happened to Charles. He was sentenced to 35 years without parole. When the judge read the final charge, Jordan didn't flinch. He just stared at the floor like he'd finally realized what he'd destroyed. Not just a business, but the family that had raised him. After the sentencing, I stood outside the courthouse as the media swarmed me. They wanted a statement, a headline, a soundbite. All I said was this: he took everything my father built and poisoned it, but he couldn't poison the truth, and he couldn't bury me. Then I walked away. Carter Timber Works was dissolved 2 months later. The remaining assets were liquidated. A large portion went to help the families affected by the school incident, exactly how Charles would have wanted. Luis was offered a new job at a sustainable building nonprofit. He said he finally felt proud to work in wood again. As for me, I didn't stay CEO. I never wanted that life. Instead, I used my portion of the settlement to open a small community woodshop, free for students and local artists. I named it Charles and Daughter. I teach kids how to carve, how to build something real, and most importantly, how to stand up when the world tries to silence you. My mother visits the shop sometimes. She brings flowers for the front desk and smiles when she sees the kids working on their first projects. I think, deep down, she always knew what Charles saw in me. She just forgot for a while. And Jordan? He sits in a federal prison. No money, no name, no power, just time. Lots and lots of time. The world remembers the Carter name now, but not for its wealth, for its warning, and for the daughter who refused to stay quiet. Comment the number 3 if you stayed to the end, and want more real stories where the truth wins no matter the cost. Don't forget to subscribe for the next one.